This KFAN podcast is sponsored by Builders and Remodelers, exclusive Twin Cities provider of Elements Windows. Get the highest quality windows at unmatchable value. Visit buildersandremodelers.com for more details.
Current high bid $3,000 as we help Greg Coleman help raise money for local sports and mentoring at the YMCA. 2 tickets and a touchdown suite for the Vikings-Ravens game. That's on Sunday, November 9th. Touchdown suite. Guests have full access to the Delta Sky 360 Club and its all-inclusive hospitality. Theater seats right there on the field. Phenomenal spot. You also get a hotel, game day breakfast with Greg, a Greg Coleman jersey, a Vikings legend signed football, and 2 signed copies of Greg's book, Punt, Flip the Field. 651-989-5326 if you want to outbid the current high bid of $3,000.
Delighted to be joined in studio by Alan Page. And I want to get to a couple of texts, Alan. And one of them actually it will introduce a subject I wanted to discuss with you anyway. But before that, this comes from Johnny. Tell Alan Page that my 3-year-old knows what perpendicular means because of him, which I'm sure you'll appreciate.
I love that.
I've read a bunch of William Kent Kruger books, including the one you were mentioned. Fantastic author, should be required reading for all Minnesotans. He's just a good writer, period. Now, there's a Minnesota angle, no question, but he's good. No question about that. Here's the toss-up one. How did being, this is from Craig, listening out of Boston, how did being a judge affect your outlook on life?
How did being a judge affect my outlook?
If it did.
I'm not sure that it did. I'd say the converse of that is true. How my outlook on life influenced my...
Gotcha. Right. Your judgeship.
My judgeship. My outlook on life has always been one of as some would say, an overdeveloped sense of fairness. And so I brought that to my work on the court. But I'm not sure that the converse of that worked.
Did you, while you were a judge, any of that time, did you surprise yourself in any way as you grew into that position?
I don't know that I surprised myself. One of the things that surprised me is there's this sense that the more you do something, the easier it gets. That wasn't the case with my service on the court. The more I did it, the more difficult it got. And the reason being that the more you saw, the more you could see. And so when you're trying to solve today's problem, but also understand the ramifications of the decision you're making, when you can constantly see more, it's a constant challenge and a constant battle to make sure that you're on top of it. And I think in some respects that's what I love so much about it.
Keeps you humble too.
Well,
it has to, right?
It sure does.
It should, based on what you're saying, right?
It absolutely does.
Let's talk about a very serious subject, because we've not had a chance to catch up in a while. And I'm curious to get what you remember about this weekend as you learned of it and what it had you thinking about. We had, of course, earlier this summer, the unimaginable take place in our midst, political assassination.
Yep.
And I'm curious to know how you processed that, how you found out about it, sort of what that whole weekend was like from your standpoint, and what you make of it.
Well, I think the net for me was just asking, who have we become? Who are we as a people? What has led us to this point in time and space? And how do we re-find ourselves? I mean, that was my takeaway from it.
How hard a weekend was it for you?
Well, different in the sense that it was political, but people go through this all the time with loved ones,
yes,
with people they love and care about. And having served on the court, I had the opportunity to see more than a little bit of it.
One of the stories, I meant to save it. I don't have it in front of me, but I'd read just within the last 2 or 3 weeks, attempted to lay out the increasing number of threats that judges at various levels are dealing with, that it is beyond any previous proportion, that folks, it's not like it's unprecedented, but that the numbers are great. The anecdotes that judges were giving out in these stories were frightening to me.
Right.
What do you make of that? What is that about?
Well, it's all about intimidation, and there are those who want to influence outcomes, and that's just one more way to do it.
What kinds of threats did you face when you were on the Supreme Court?
I was exceedingly fortunate. None that I recall.
None
that I recall. But then I wasn't, I wasn't expecting any,
right,
and wasn't looking for any, so I wasn't sort of going out of my way to be concerned about it.
There's no rational distinction between whether someone from the legislative branch, executive branch, or judicial branch is threatened, or in the case of Melissa Hortman, of course, assassinated. But I've always felt like, because of the significance of the judge's role, the belief that these are the folks who have to break the ties, these are the individuals who we entrust with making these massive decisions, that it takes it to a new level when judges are put in this position where they are being threatened.
Well, and they clearly are being threatened. And, that's the reality we live with. That's the reality that we as a society live with. And unfortunately, I don't see it changing anytime soon.
There are people who say, and I think we've talked about this before, that they're wondering what the political landscape is going to be post President Trump. There's some people who say we're never going back, that certain lines were crossed, and because they were crossed so easily and so blatantly and so often, that there's no fear of continuing to cross those lines. There are others who believe, no, there will be an adjustment back because there's not anyone quite like him in terms of his what he's been able to pull off. Do you have an opinion on that, where we're headed?
Well, my sense is that, when you're talking about policy, we can always fix that. Doesn't matter whose policy, what policy. If there's a problem with it, we can always fix that. My concern has been one of this sense that the rules don't apply, and the fact that those who are watching are political figures, no matter who they are. If the rules don't apply to them, they must not apply to me. And that, I think, the challenge will be, how do we put that ink back in the bottle?
There was a story this morning, that's how fresh it is, New York Times, that I want to get your reaction to. I don't know if you've seen it, and you may not have an opinion on it, I don't know. But the headline is, the Democratic Party faces a voter registration crisis. The party is bleeding support beyond the ballot box, a new analysis shows. Democratic Party, writes the New York Times writers, is hemorrhaging voters long before they even go to the polls. So the 30 states that track voter registration by political party, Democrats lost ground to Republicans in every single one between the 2020 and 2024 elections, and often by a lot. And that 4-year swing towards the Republicans adds up to 4.5 million votes or voters, a deep political hole that could take years for Democrats to climb out of. And the timing is interesting because Joe Scarborough, who has a show called Morning Joe on MSNBC, and, well, actually, Guardsy, do we have that sound? Is it ready? If not, no big deal. I think Guardsy is looking for it right now. And it dovetails, it gets into the question of strategy. What's the Democrats' best approach, especially when you're dealing with the wild card, to put it kindly, that Donald J. Trump represents? And Joe is a former Republican, as I think you know, but he's been no friend to the president. He's been as critical as anybody the last several years. He went off on a rant involving the California governor, Gavin Newsom. Let's listen to him and we'll get...
Can he hear? Does he have the headphones?
Oh, you got to put your headset on. I'm sorry. Good point. Yeah, we told you didn't need your headset. Now it'll help to have your headset on and get a better sense of what Joe had to say. Let's listen.
Like, you're trying to do everything to distract the American people from the fact that you're screwing up on job one. And job one is helping working Americans and helping the middle class afford their lives and build a life where their children are going to live better than them. That's the American dream. And you have done nothing but play politics over the past year and a half. It's really not that hard to do.
We'll see.
It's really not. Cut and paste. It's really not hard to do. And I would be telling the Republicans the same thing if Democrats were off over here. It's not hard, but I don't know why they, like Gavin Newsom, he wants to own Donald Trump. He wants to be Donald Trump light. You can't be Donald Trump light. Hey, Gavin, talk into the camera and talk about making life more affordable, not only for people in California, but if you want to talk about people in New Hampshire, our people in Iowa, our people in South Carolina, they would like to know how their lives can be more affordable, not how you can own Donald Trump. Donald Trump is not running again. These Democrats, who I have called Chuck Wepner instead of Muhammad Ali, Chuck Wepners, they're the ones that are running again. They're the ones that are in the boxing ring with Democrats, not Donald Trump.
It does seem.
All right, you get the gist. It's the ongoing debate within the party, which is how much is the job to just go at quote unquote owning him, or in the end does that actually play into his hands? And I think that's part of what Joe, screaming like he often does, not exactly your style, I know, is pointing out. Do you agree? Do you disagree? What do you make of that? What's your reaction?
Not much. I mean, I don't have a reaction.
Okay.
I don't spend a lot of time listening to this back and forth. I find it unproductive, no matter who it is, no matter what they're talking about. I'm inclined to try to identify the problem and figure out some solution for it.
But you care about the issues it raises, correct?
I do, but getting into the swamp to
right
to do whatever, I just don't think that helps anybody.
All right, let's take one more. Let's take a break, and then we get into a couple of other items. Alan Page, kind enough to join us in studio. You have nowhere to go, do you? You're here. You could be here forever, or I don't think you want to be here forever. But I mean, we got a few other things I think worthy of discussion, and some more texts that are coming in as well. Alan, our only guest today. We'll get to the top 5 at 5, some more Viking stuff, and who knows what else before we wrap it up at 6.
Fan.
Joining us in studio this afternoon, which we very much appreciate. Let me get to a couple of texts real quick before we maybe enter into some other areas. Where did it go? Because this was someone. Oh, this is from Dave and Albert Lee. He writes, I met Judge Page when the Minnesota Supreme Court held meetings at the Gainey Conference Center in Owatonna, where I was chef. I believe he collected Black Americana literature and memorabilia. Could you ask him about that? I have a huge assortment of those books that my grandmother read to me as a kid back in the late 60s. Great conversation today.
Diane and I, actually, Diane did collect African American art and memorabilia. We had the good fortune over the years to put on an exhibit at the Minneapolis Central Library in 2018 and again in 2023, displaying some of the art and artwork. From the exhibit was Testify, African American art and artifacts from slavery to today. And it was important for us, important for me, important for Diane, to display these artifacts so that we don't forget where we come from. We can talk all we want and say all we want, but when you see a collar, a metal collar that was used to hold somebody in bondage, to hold another human being in bondage, this isn't somebody's opinion. This is a fact. And we can all have our opinions, but we can't have our own facts. And I think it is vitally important that we do not forget that part of our history, the factual part of that history, because absent that remembrance, we are, as they say, doomed to repeat it.
Very excellent point, and we've talked about that before. In fact, you've done a number, I know, with the TV stations have done stories with you where you've given them tours, correct, of the stuff that you guys have collected over the decades, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's moving and it is, the visuals are jolting, right? It takes it to when you actually see these items, and as you say, what they were used for, it's hard to get it out of your head.
Well, and it's to my way of thinking, it's important not to get it out of our heads, because it's as human beings, we seem to be inclined to want to not sure of the right term again, but we are inclined to want to oppress others, and that oppression leads to injustice. And I think where there is injustice, as Martin Luther King Jr. said, injustice to one of us is injustice to all of us.
It's interesting you bring him up, because we were talking. I found myself a bit stunned earlier in the week. There's a game show called, what's it called, Guardsy? Quiz with Balls, and to win $100,000, the contestant had to answer this question. In what decade was the MLK I Have a Dream speech? And I said to myself, we apparently have lowered the standards in our game show questions, when that question, which we'd like to think is pretty obvious, not a tough one, is the one that gets you $100,000, Alan Page. That pretty much stunned me. I'm thinking that's one I'd like to, and again, maybe it speaks to what you're saying. Maybe some people want to forget, but I'd like to think that there would be tougher questions than that.
Sadly, I think not only do some people want to forget, there are people who want to take us back. And that's a real danger. And that's why Diane and I wanted to put on the exhibit at the library as a reminder of where we've come from. You know, as a judge, the law hasn't always been just. We have not always had equal justice under the law. Dred Scott, you know, any number of cases in our history that supported the ends of white supremacy, of slavery, of subjugating human beings. Those cases and the law have changed, and we need to make sure that we don't go backwards. To me, that's critically important, because when we, as I said, when we deny the rights of some, we make it much easier to deny the rights of all.
You know, in the final minutes here with you, there's almost no subject I'm going to try to explore now that is going to, you know, like make any sense to finish up with, because that's on such a higher level. But I'm going to try nevertheless, because we've kind of covered a lot of ground. And I do want to bring it back a little bit into the toy department, as I like to call it, because I don't think this is something we've ever explored together. You know, one of the trends, and we talk about it on this show from time to time, is the frustration that coaches, youth coaches, junior high coaches, high school coaches have, and even in like little leagues, with parents, a belief that parents who may have all the great intentions, in some cases have become too invested in the progress that their kid is making on the diamond, on the field, on the court, to the point where we have, you know, from time to time, some pretty embarrassing stories about what coaches have to put up with, petitions to get them, you know, take their jobs away. Little league baseball umpires, sometimes their kids themselves just getting hammered and yelled at, bad call, et cetera, et cetera. I'm curious to know, if you go back in your memory banks, how invested was your family, your parents, in whatever your endeavor was, high school, whatever sports you were involved with there? How did they handle that with you? And do you have any magical solutions to what were this trend that so many lament?
I don't have any magic solutions, but the bottom line is the young person playing the sport, whatever the sport is, are they having fun? That's what this should all be about. You know, the winning and losing, I've learned over time that winning every game doesn't make you any better as a person. Losing every game doesn't make you any worse as a person. And the real question is, are you having fun? And what are you learning from the experience? And, you know, not everybody's going to be on top all the time. That's just a reality. With our children and my children's grandchildren, the focus has been on participation, trying to be as good as you can be, and recognize that, you know, among other things, life isn't always fair, and it is never going to always be fair. And you learn sometimes from that unfairness. You learn how to overcome adversity. Some would say at the end of the day, it's not whether you won or lost. What did you learn from the experience? And certainly when I look back on my career now, easy for me to say because I had a lot of good things happen.
Yep.
But at the end of the day, it's important to understand the journey more than the destination. the journey more than the wins and losses. And I can tell you, I was a poor loser. Super Bowl, preseason game, regular season game, didn't like to lose. All that said, when all is said and done, it was important, looking back on it, to understand that I did the best that I could do. And I think young people can focus on being the best that they can be and do the best that they can do. And the results will take care of themselves.
You didn't make history at the time and now become one of only 2 defensive players to win MVP by not being competitive. So you were a competitive SOB.
Well, over time, the competition changed. I think we all start off focusing on whoever the opponent is. But one of the things I figured out was that when you focus on whoever the particular opponent may be, you tend to play at their level or maybe slightly better than their level. And when you do that, you're never going to be as good as you can be. And so at the end, the competition was being as good as I could be. And so competing, in a sense, against myself.
What has happened with, I don't want to say every parent, because it's not every parent, but it seems like there's a growing percentage of parents that have lost their way in this regard. Well, so what's happened there?
Those parents existed before.
You think they did?
Oh, absolutely.
We're just noticing them more. They get publicized more now.
We're noticing them more. They get publicized more, and maybe they're more visible in the sense of what they do.
Social media is out there, right?
Is out there, and what they're doing is more outrageous. But those parents existed before. My parents, they were happy for me that I was out there playing, and hoped that I enjoyed it. And
that's the most rational approach.
Liked it when we win, and were unhappy when we lost.
Yeah.
I grew up. I grew up in a family that focused on education, and when something went wrong in school, it wasn't an option to come home and say the teacher did X, Y, and Z. It was on me, and the teacher was always right, and I had to figure out how to navigate all that. And we tend to want to put the responsibility on somebody else now, instead of looking inward and figuring out what we can do and what our responsibility is.
I would say that served you well.
Served me exceedingly well.
Final thoughts as we wrap up with Alan Page. We spent a lot of time when the news broke that Jim Marshall had passed away about what he seemed to represent to the organization. And I think part of my thrust was to say that I don't know that there is another player who seemed to embody everything we associate, including myth. Again, we're back to myth and reality. Than Jim Marshall. That, to me, he is in some ways the ultimate Viking. What do you think? What are your recollections of him?
Oh, no question that he is and will always be the ultimate Viking. I'm laughing because of my perfectly pointy and possibly perpendicular pinky. He played a role in that. He was able to do it all. There's the saying, when you look in the dictionary for football player, or when you look in the dictionary for Minnesota Viking, picture of Jim Marshall will show up. He was, and always will be the face of this franchise. He gave his heart and his soul And he was an incredible leader, both on and off the field, that I think we all owe him a tremendous debt of gratitude.
What was the connection? I felt like, Bud, every time we had Bud on, he'd say, I'm not going to say favorite player because I got too many good players. I don't like doing that. But I always felt like there was a connection there. I mean, a couple times I remember him tearing up, and Bud didn't do that a lot. It was talking about Jim Marshall. What was that connection about, do you think?
Jim gave his heart. I mean, he gave it all for making this team a success. You could see it in his eyes. You could see it in his being. You could feel it. It was palpable. And I think it's that simple. And a lot of people make a commitment. But Jim's commitment was above and beyond that of us more ordinary mortals.
And Chuck Foreman has told us many times over the years when we've talked about Mankato days that everything from a player's standpoint ran through Jim in terms of you want to get back in, without getting caught. Jim's got all the keys. He knows all the entrances. Everything ran through Jim. Is that true?
I would assume so, yes. Some of those experiences I'm not familiar with.
Very well stated. Always a pleasure to see you.
My pleasure.
Continued success and good health, and I'm glad you're still filling the time. It's still you find things to do that you enjoy, and sometimes that's not easy for former players. But then again, of course, you did have this other career that might have extended things in that regard. But it doesn't feel like you ever run out of things to do.
As I said before, I've been exceedingly lucky and exceedingly fortunate. And I had a sense that I had a life beyond football before I had football. And the football was just a part of that life and a glorious part of it, but simply just one of the aspects of it.
We'll finish with this text. Truly enjoy listening to Mr. Page, clearly a man of great character and a leader that we can all learn from. A life well lived. I couldn't agree more. Outstanding words spoken. And again, it means a lot to me that you make the effort, because I know it's a pain in the neck. It's not something you have to do, that you make the effort to come to see us today every time you've had, whether it's been at the fair or here. And now I don't have to bug you about the fair coming up because you came in today, so you don't have to worry about us being annoying in that regard, too. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
The great Alan Page, kind enough to join us in studio. We will take a short pause, prepare for Top 5 at 5 in just about 20 minutes.
Time to jump in and help out with Greg Coleman's auction to raise money for local sports and mentoring at the YMCA. Current high bid $3,000 for a couple of tickets and a touchdown suite. That's field level for Vikings-Ravens Sunday, November 9th. You also get hotel that weekend, game day breakfast with Greg, a Greg Coleman jersey, Vikings Legends signed football, 2 signed copies of Greg's book, Punt, Flip the Field, 651-989-5326. If you want to outbid Todd, $3,000.
Wow. That's good news. It seems like it's going good, right? That whole bit.
Absolutely.
That's outstanding. Let's finish up this hour with some text responding to our hour and change with Alan Page, former Minnesota Viking great, and of course a member of the Minnesota Supreme Court. You know, my only regret is once we broke there, we're talking more about Jim Marshall. And I said, you know, it's interesting because I said, obviously, Alan, you were a better player. And yet, before I could go on any further, he said, I'm not sure about that. He said, I'm not sure I would even say that I was a better player. And he went on with a couple of anecdotes about watching, being right next to him, obviously at the line, the scrimmage, in a goal line situation, watching Marshall take on a double team, two blockers, and obliterating them. And he actually believes that Marshall gets all the credit as being the Viking, right? There's no question about that. We were reminded of that when he passed away, and we talked a lot about it and got a lot of input. He thinks the underrated part of Jim Marshall is the player, not the myth about, you know, playing every game, but that he was a better player than people realize as well, which I thought was quite interesting. Texts, this is 763 from Rick. Alan Page, a man's man, integrity, poise, grace, and kindness, what this world is lacking right now. Thanks for having Alan on, as always. A great guest. Alan Page for president. Thank you, Justice Page. Saw it today. Mike Conley made his first hole-in-one.
Yeah, I think that happened a day or two ago.
Non sequitur, but it, whatever. It doesn't make any difference. We get to a couple of other quickies here. Dan, one of the most impactful interviews I've heard. Alan Page is a man of such strength and grace, incredible dignity. I remember when he received the Presidential Medal of Freedom placed by President Trump, a powerful picture. As a white man, I cannot even imagine the barriers he has overcome to become a model for us all. I am humbled by his grace. Can you ask Alan Page about Bud Grant's relationship/player support in the early NFL strikes? I didn't get to that. I apologize. And it kind of goes on from there. So, with Alan, there's always a million, no matter how much you get to, there's always a million other directions. But I think what you try to do each time we have him on is fill in some gaps and then just add to the library we have of I think, a very, for me, enlightening conversations with him. And, one of the things that's changed, I believe, over the years with Alan, even since we've been doing interviews with him, is his willingness to talk about his football career again.
Yeah.
He had a stretch where he seemed almost, I wouldn't say bristle's too strong a term, but just, that was then. I don't need to go through any of that anymore. But in more recent years, I think he's been more than willing to get specific about some of those memories. We had, again, a good 10 minutes regarding that famous, the Michigan State Notre Dame game that ended in a 10-10 tie. That was number 1 versus number 2, a game that if it were held today with teams of that level, those are all-time college football teams.
Right. All
time. That go beyond the era, the 60s in which they played. The world would explode with the level of pregame coverage and then game day coverage that would go into that sort of thing. I think he's just become a lot more willing, I think, to discuss not just his judgeship, not just some of the clearly passionate opinions and facts that he likes to remind us of regarding race in this country, about where we came from and what, to a certain extent, the era in which he grew up. It was also fascinating to me to hear him talk about, he believes it's the same number of parents, that there are always parents who are a little bit out of control about how fiercely protective they were, how willing they were to go over the top. He just thinks we know about them more now because when those stories happen, they go viral. They become more than anecdotes. And so then you start assuming that there's more of that. And he reminded us of something he's talked about before, that there was an area in which his parents were unreasonably tough on him, or you could argue were unreasonably tough. But they weren't tough on the teacher. They weren't tough on the principal. They were tough on their child, on Alan. I don't care what you think the teacher should have done there or whether you think the teacher's being unfair or not. That doesn't meet the standard that we know you're capable of meeting. And let's face it, there's no more valuable lesson, as he reminded us, that a parent can give their child, correct? That remains, doesn't matter what era you're in. What's interesting is, if you talk to teachers, they will tell you they don't think it's just because we're in a viral world, that the number of parents who are more willing to come back to the school and place the blame on those teachers and those principals is much higher than it once was. And their point is no different than Alan's, that it ends up not serving the student in any meaningful way. Anything in particular hit you?
Well, on the football stuff, well, first of all, the self-accountability, it was tremendous, right? Like he said, it's on you to figure it out. It is a great lesson. It's absolutely the lesson that you should want. And when you're a kid, you don't want it because you want the easy way out, but that's the bit about parenting. I was surprised you mentioned how much he talked about the Michigan State Notre Dame stuff and even his own recruitment at Notre Dame and the aura of Notre Dame and how that drew him to the school and the new Rockne stuff and everything that came with it.
Yes.
That just proves, I always just assumed it didn't really matter all that much to him, or he didn't really not remember it, but that's all still like top of his mind. He just didn't want to talk about it because for whatever the reason, maybe it was because he was on the Supreme Court. He didn't think he should.
Yes.
Like he had all of that. I mean, he was telling you.
He's a new Rocky guy.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was almost like win one for the Gipper.
But I've never been as beat up as I was after that Michigan State game. Then we had to ride the train and get back onto the plane to go to Southern California. And 2 years before that, we were up 17-0 at halftime and we lost.
Yes.
And I remember we were up 17 halftime right before halftime this time. And I said, we're not doing this again. We got to get another score. He remembers all of it. He just didn't want to talk about it before, which I thought was fascinating.
And it was, I don't ever remember hearing him endorse the mythology of the Golden Domers, of, Notre Dame, touchdown Jesus, all of that.
It starts with the dome.
Because with Alan Page, his reputation, you'd think he would be almost like, oh, okay, that's great. That's mythology. That doesn't really have anything to do with reality. But he seemed to he kind of acknowledged, and for the first time, at least with us, that he ate that up, that was part of what he thought he was walking into, and that's what he thought it was when he left. And it's hard. I grew up, I've said this before, I grew up in Gary, Indiana, so Notre Dame was big. South Bend's not that far. And it can be grating to hear Notre Dame fans and Notre Dame alum or parents of kids who go to Notre Dame basically say, okay, you're a cute kid. You can go to Indiana if you want. You can go to Purdue, but it's Notre Dame, man. And that was hard to hear because, let's face it, any university experience can be wonderful depending on how you handle it. And Indiana and Purdue are very good schools as well. But when I've covered back in the day, along many, many, many decades ago, when I covered games there, I'm not going to lie to you. Because I used to be, Uncle Jack was the Notre Dame, insufferable Notre Dame guy because he sent his kid there. Son was also named Jack, Jackie Boy. And it used to, we'd roll our eyes. Oh, my God, more about Jackie Boy and Notre Dame. Give me a break, like no other school ever existed. But then I went there and covered some games. And I said, oh, God, this is different.
Yeah.
There is something. Now, I don't know if that's still true. I don't know if it's lost a little of that in the last 10 or 20 years.
I don't think it has.
But it is. There's a different feel there that just, and maybe the movies have something to do with that, the new Rockne part of it, whatever, but I think there's some truth to it.
Did you have a little tinge of regret?
No.
You didn't?
No, because I don't even know that I ever even explored. I don't even know what Notre Dame was like in terms of journalism.
Yeah.
Probably was great. I'm not sure.
Oh, they're good at everything.
But they're good at everything. But that was one I never really explored. So I didn't have that much regret.
Well, how dumb for people that live the Golden Dome lifestyle. They were one of the schools that recruited me one of the first colleges, then said, you want to come visit?
Intoxicating.
But how stupid am I? There was another kid from Minnesota a few years before me that went there.
And didn't like it?
Just like never played.
Oh, I see.
I didn't really know if they were really recruiting me or it's because my grades, believe it or not, were actually okay and they need a good program. I didn't buy it.
So you didn't really explore it?
I didn't.
You never visited?
Not
really
on a recruiting trip, no.
And you could have, you're saying?
I was invited.
Wow.
I remember the assistant coach saying,
there's the regret right there.
We'd love to have you for a visit. But I had it burned in my mind that I wasn't going to really get an opportunity.
Okay.
And I don't even know if that was true or not. But I think about that sometimes. I ended up playing there in a tournament at some point and kind of walking around, looking around. You know me, I'm a rube.
Yeah,
I would have loved it.
Sure. Yeah, no, I think you would.
But
That's
I had
interesting.
that in
I don't
my
remember
head.
you telling me that before.
I had that in my head that I just don't think I'm going to.
Right.
Are they really recruiting me? Or because I want to play.
And who knows? Maybe you would have stayed there rather than gone to 4 more colleges.
I might have been more serious.
You might have lost yourself in touchdown Jesus' eyes to such an extent that you never left.
It would probably be the Golick and Guard show on FanDuel now. I probably would have just linked up with the Golicks.
Think about it.
I would just Golick and Guardsy.
It's seamless.
And you'd be watching me on FanDuel
right
now.
FanDuel.
You'd be here with Tiny Joe Nelson or somebody else.
And what about the other Golick? Or would
they'd be
two Golics and Guard?
Both Golicks.
Both Golics and Guard.
The original Mike Jr. and then me.
Good.
I could have been their producer.
That's pretty good stuff.
But I blew it.
Yeah. Well, that's
now I just have to watch Rudy.
That's quite a regret.
Yeah.
I don't remember you telling me that before.
I still don't buy that I would have. Well,
who knows?
Realistic.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Maybe I'm selling myself short.
But you might be.
But I'll never know. Like you with Mariah Carey, I'll never know.
It's tantalizing
because I didn't even go.
You didn't even give it a shot.
You didn't go to the party?
No.
I didn't go to Notre Dame.
Yeah. God, Jimmy Jam. His wife said, man, she's going to be there all weekend.
Mariah's coming.
Come and see us.
No, I'm good.
Oh, man. I was too cool.
Yeah.
Too cool for Mariah Carey.
Yeah, it's probably a Wolves-Suns game you wanted to check out.
In that period, you're probably right.
Yeah.
Sadly enough. God, what a sap. Anyway, top 5 will include.
Speaking of mythic college football, was it Bear Bryant today at TCO? The Junction Boys practice apparently breaking out with the Vikings.